Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourished, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, Erin Casey, registered dietitian and owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we do just that. We teach you to unlearn all of the conditioning that diet culture has taught you, all of the lies about your body, about its health, and what nourishment actually means. And we guide you towards true food freedom, which means you feel free and empowered to make nutritious as well as joyful choices in your food selections. So today I have a little ditty for you by request, actually, by request via Instagram, on a topic that I feel like I coach a lot of my clients through, and that is setbacks, right? Just about everybody who's on any type of journey, right? And honestly, it doesn't even have to be a health journey. It can be, and anything that you're trying to do. It can be a business journey, as I have learned, as an entrepreneur myself. It can be a financial journey. It can be a career journey. Really, any type of journey is more than likely going to have setbacks, and that's certainly the case with many of my clients and many of their health goals. Whether those goals are weight loss, diabetes management, managing GI issues, I help coach them through all of that, and inevitably there's going to be hiccups along the way, because change is very hard. So I wanted to just kind of share with you all today some of the kind of common threads that I see in that, and then of course some of the solutions that I coach my clients towards. And if you are liking what you hear, but you are interested in knowing more about how you can apply this to your life, I certainly encourage you to go over to our website. It is just newunutrition.com. That's nunutrition.com, and I will link it, and of course in the show notes below. And you can fill out a contact form, request a free discovery call. That is just a free 15-minute call with me. We sit down, you kind of tell me about, the issues you're concerned about, what your goals may be, even some things that you have kind of tried in the past that maybe haven't worked. Even either they have worked and you stopped doing them, or they just didn't work and you're kind of looking for alternatives. And we basically just decide, is this a good fit? Is nutrition counseling something that may help you towards those goals? Most of the time it is, but not always. Um, so certainly feel free to reach out to me. There's also lots of free downloadables on my website. There's, of course, links to the podcast and older episodes and things like that if this is of interest to you. So definitely go check it out. You can certainly do the free resources page, has lots of goodies, and you can sign up for that either free discovery call or just kind of fill out the contact form, be like, hey, I want more information. I don't necessarily want to look into counseling right now, but I just want more information on what's available. All of that information is right there. So setbacks, right? They happen, right? Is, you find kind of your groove that is working really well for you, and then almost inevitably, because this is how life is, right? Something happens that disrupts your flow. That can be something such as, an illness, right? Like you get sick, or one of your kids gets sick, or one that's been common, at this time of year is school starts, right? So we've kind of gotten into a summer routine, and now school is starting. And whether you have kids in school or not, honestly, I feel like school starting kind of affects all of us universally. It affects traffic patterns. Certainly if you work in any type of university setting, it's going to affect things. If you have kids, obviously their schedules are going to change. So that can be a big hiccup for a lot of folks. You could be traveling, right? Whether you're traveling for pleasure, like on a vacation, you could be traveling for work. You could kind of unexpectedly, have to travel more for work, or your work schedule changes for either a period of time or somewhat permanently. You get a new job, all of these things, right? This is life, right? We all go through it, and things change. So what can we do about it, right? The first thing I always tell people is, honestly, is a mindset shift. So kind of instead of focusing on that the change as being a setback per se, right? Basically what it is, you are just not doing the same things that you were doing a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, etc. And that's not necessarily bad. It just means that things have changed. So I encourage you, before you do anything else, to really wrap your mind around, instead of calling it a setback, calling it a tempo change. A tempo change is kind of some nomenclature that I stole from my running days, right? Um, so in running, a tempo change is literally you just adjust your pace, and you manipulate your tempo intentionally, kind of for various sets of training. So for example, you may run at an increased tempo for 2 miles, and then a decreased tempo for 2 miles, and an increased tempo again, to eventually be able to run at that increased tempo long term, but you're kind of working your way there. You also may train different distances at different tempos and things like that, but the point is, your body's going to respond to that tempo change, right? If you're running at, an 8-minute mile compared to a 12-minute mile, those are going to feel very different. A mile at each of those paces is going to feel very different. And life is the same way, right? Life is very different whether your kids are out on summer vacation or they're in school. Life is very different when you have a standard 9 to 5 job or you work 12-hour shifts 3 days a week. Those are very different, and sometimes they're predictable and sometimes they're not, but I encourage you to consider it a tempo change, because that just means that something is different. And that something doesn't necessarily have to be something external, by the way. It certainly can be something internal. Those of you who are kind of familiar or follow me on social media, I've kind of disclosed a little bit, here recently. I've just kind of emotionally been in a rut. And I don't want to go into all the reasons for that here, but the point is that, there's really no external factors in my life have changed. Just emotionally, I have changed, which means that my motivation for things has changed. My energy level has changed. My sleep quality has changed. So my ability to do the things that I once did has also changed, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be some big extraneous thing that is changing. It can be even just internal emotionally to you, or someone in your family, or what have you. So I think it's just important to recognize that, okay, the tempo has shifted, right? It's not your fault. It may not even have anything to do with you. It's just something that is different in your life, and now we deal with it. And the tempo is shifted, and then we want to identify, okay, the tempo has changed. Is that a temporary change or kind of a longer term change? I don't want to say permanent, because honestly, nothing in life is permanent, but like, is it something that's going to be going on for a while? So, for example, a temporary change would be something like you're sick, one of your kids is sick, um, somebody like a spouse or a parent, or someone's having surgery or in the hospital or something like that. It's maybe intense, but it's temporary, right? It's not going to, hopefully anyway, last a very long time, versus something that's kind of more long term. It would be something like a job change. It could certainly be something even like, your kids going back to school. That's going to be, 9 months at the very least. So I would consider that a pretty long-term change. um Something, or if someone, if you're caring for an elder parent or something like that, and that's going to be unfortunately a more permanent situation. Those are the kinds of things that would be a more long-term change. And sometimes you don't know, right? Sometimes you think it's going to be short-term, and then it turns out that it's going to be long-term. And that's okay, right? Like, you give yourself permission to navigate that space. Sick family members kind of tend to fall in that category, where sometimes we think it's permanent or we think it's temporary. It glides into permanent. Jobs can also be that way too, where we think it's like a situational thing that we're going to have to be working extra hours or traveling more, and then all of a sudden that just kind of becomes a way of life. um, so it is okay for things to move from one category to the other. But how we treat them, at least, and kind of with the information that we have, is somewhat different. So if it is a temporary change, right? So if it's something simple, like, I don't know, you, heaven forbid, came down with COVID and you are just too sick to move or get off the couch. Obviously, your eating habits are going to be different. Obviously, your movement habits are going to be different, as they should be, right? That kind of a tempo change, you need to take different care of your body because it needs different things from you during that time. Um, and that's okay, right? It is okay. You're not losing progress. You're just dealing with a different situation. You're dealing with a different tempo, and that's okay. For most of those kind of temporary changes, my goal to you is just survive. Just survive it. Do whatever you need to do to get through it. Let's say You're going on vacation. I don't care if your exercise routine is not what it is at home while you're on vacation. I don't care if your eating habits are different when you're on vacation. They should be different. You have access to more and obviously better food when you're on vacation. You're probably not cooking most of your food, and hopefully you're eating really delicious food, and that's okay, right? Like those are temporary things. Those are not setbacks. That's just life. That's life, during some temporary things. Same thing, if one of your kids is sick, if it's, maybe your physical body doesn't need more, but you are being asked to do different things than you normally do day to day. And if that means your workouts are not the same, or, you're doing them at home versus a gym, or, you're cooking different things because the family wants different things, fine, right? Like that's a temporary thing. It's not a setback. It's just a tempo change for a short period of time, and I promise you there is nothing that you can do in a day, a week, honestly probably even a month, that is going to completely derail good habits once you form them. You may not see the same progress you were seeing before, kind of depending on what progress you're monitoring, but at the same time you're not going to go backwards, right? That's why I don't like the term setback, because you're not going backwards. At best, you are stalling. And even if you are stalling, the mental work of self-compassion and, giving yourself grace and like focusing on doing what you can when you can, all of those different mental tricks are still there. Like that's still part of the work. That's inevitably, no matter what your journey is, consistency is likely part of it. And if you are in a position where you can't be as consistent as you once were, but you're still trying, guess what? You're still doing that work. You're still doing what you set out to do. It just looks different for a short period of time for some specified reason, right? Um, so my goal in those kind of temporary tempo changes is just to really survive and to honestly give yourself some grace, because things are just different. You only fail, and I always tell people this, like there is no setback, there really isn't any failure either, because the only way you ever fail is if you quit. So making sure that we're giving ourselves grace, that we're kind of letting those rational parts of our brain, that, maybe our emotional brain is kind of trying to squawk at us saying like, oh, you can't do anything right, you can't stick to this, the second something goes wrong, like you're a failure. You're not a failure. You're just not. You cannot fail unless you quit. And if you're not quitting, then you're not failing, and you never will. So I think there's a lot of power in that statement, right? I'm going to say it again. You cannot fail unless you quit. So whatever you do to keep strumming along, whether that changes hour by hour, day by day, you are still in it and you are still succeeding. It just looks different. Okay. So those are kind of my tactics for things that are just temporary. Just kind of get through it and then reassess when the kind of the sky's clear, so to speak. If we have something that is a little bit more permanent, right? So this is something, and I don't know that there's really like a strict timeline as to like what's temporary versus what's permanent. Kind of in my brain, when I think about, things that are kind of temporary, are things that are like maybe a couple of weeks up to a month. Things that are a little bit more permanent are longer than that. That's obviously not hard and fast, but that's just kind of in my brain, kind of what I'm thinking when I say temporary versus permanent. So something permanent, right? So or longer term, that is not going to be just, a couple of weeks in the making. Then we kind of want to start thinking about new strategies, right? So what once was possible or was once, successful, maybe isn't anymore, just because the circumstances that allowed for those certain behaviors are no longer present, good or bad, right? Like it could be something like you were working in an awful toxic job and you had no time to work out, so all you did was walk on your lunch break. Well, now you work in a different job that like maybe you don't have the space to go walking on your lunch break, but you only work like 9 to 5, and you're able to work out outside of that, right? So you would want to come up with a different strategy. It could be the opposite, right? It could be that you worked in a very kind of structured environment and you had time before or after work to go to the gym and kind of get a full workout in. And now you are working more hours, or, working the same hours, having to go home and take care of a loved one, or just something is different, like, or you're like me, and emotionally just you're not the same person when you get off of work as you were a couple of weeks ago, and maybe that you need to work through that, but obviously those things take time, right? um so kind of, it's we need to develop different strategies. And I really, really, really encourage people to approach these types of situations from what I call a growth mindset. So if you're not familiar, there's kind of a body of literature around what we call a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset, I'm going to start with a fixed mindset. And that is more kind of what a lot of us have been conditioned to believe through diet culture. And a fixed mindset really approaches things from like a more black and white perspective of kind of there's a right and there's a wrong, right? So there's a right way to reach your health goals and there's a wrong way to reach your health goals, or really any goal. um there's a right and a wrong, and what it does is it tends to lend itself to this idea that, okay, if I can't do all of the right things, then I'm never going to be successful, and I may as well not try. Right. And I hear that so often in all of my clients. And for me, in my realm, in my scope of practice, a lot of what they have learned, or a lot of the fixed mindsets that they have learned, come from diet culture. And if you think about it, that makes sense, right? Because diet culture is essentially trying to sell you a product, it's trying to sell you a thinner body. And, they've done a really good job at deceiving all of us, because if a thinner body were actually possible, um, we would have found something that worked pretty consistently by now, but we haven't. We just keep getting sold new diets that don't work. So, really, kind of kudos to them, hats off to them, because they've basically sold us the same bogus product over and over and over again, and we keep falling for it. And a lot of the way they do that is by this kind of black and white, fixed mindset thinking of, okay, this is the right way. If you do this, you will lose weight. If you do this, you will, reduce your blood sugar. If you do this, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is that's not the case. It certainly is more true when it comes to physical goals like strength training or endurance training and things like that. Those, there is a little bit more of a set kind of protocol, but even then, like, every single human body is different, and it's going to respond to two bodies are going to respond to the same training program differently. So I think it's just kind of important to recognize that nuance. And unfortunately, so many of us are kind of conditioned that there's a right way and a wrong way, and if we either can't do the right way or we try the right way, and I should be saying all this in quotation marks, because there is no right way, but if we can't do the right way or we try the right way and it doesn't work, then something is wrong with us, or we have failed and we will never be successful. So we should just give up. And honestly, that is probably the number one thing that sabotages 90% of my clients' setbacks, or I don't even want to say setbacks, it sabotages their success, is that fixed mindset. So, as opposed to a growth mindset, right, which is more of a, okay, there's multiple right ways, right? Like, hard stop. There's multiple right ways. There's no one right way, and there's really no wrong way, right? So there's only multiple rights. And what you're doing is, instead of trying to do things according to a prescribed, right plan, what you are doing is exploring the ways that work for you. Because ultimately, as if you spent any amount of time on my page, that there's, what works for one person won't work for the next person. So a growth mindset gives you the freedom to explore, okay, well, what are those things that are going to work for me? um and it just gives you kind of a little bit of freedom. And if it doesn't work, it kind of reduces that sense of failure, or that sense of like, you are the problem. It's just kind of, okay, well, that approach didn't work, let's try another one, right? It just, you don't feel that sense of defeat, because You haven't done anything wrong, just that way didn't work for you. Okay, no big deal, move on to the next. So I really encourage that kind of growth mindset in people who are experiencing tempo changes that are going to be somewhat long term. Or if you thought it was short term and now it's kind of been a month, you're kind of looking down the barrel of the next couple of months and you're like, I just don't, you know what, I think this is a more long term thing, maybe we should try switching it up. So switching it up can look a lot of different ways, right? um, from a nutrition standpoint, let's say you at one point where you lived by yourself and you were meal prepping everything on Sunday, and it worked really well because you personally don't mind eating the same thing day to day, but now you have a spouse that is also, you guys eat different things, so maybe we have to kind of adjust our cooking habits or our meal prep habits, to where instead of cooking once, you're cooking 2 or 3 times per week and taking leftovers and things like that for lunch. Or, a big one, you have kids and suddenly what you and potentially your partner were eating as adults is not what the kids are wanting to eat, and now you're kind of suddenly finding yourself in a position where you either have to make 2 whole meals in order to make the kids happy and feed yourself, or you're eating the things that the kids are eating and you're not hitting your goals as a result. So that can kind of look like a lot of different strategies. Very often vegetables are kind of the nemesis. So it's kind of a matter of, and actually I think this is a good strategy if you do have kids, even if it's not getting in the way of your eating. um, Present kids with vegetables every time you sit down to a meal. And that doesn't mean you have to go out of your way to, like, if it's lunchtime and you're just making sandwiches and fruit cups or whatever, like that's fine, don't worry about that. But when you sit down to dinner, always present your kids with a vegetable. There's a lot of mixed schools of thought on whether or not you should force your kids to eat them, and kind of what that does to their relationship with food. I personally kind of tend to fall in the camp that it's not a great thing. I don't ever think it's going to be helpful to force kids to eat things. It just kind of forces them to kind of resent that food. But that said, if you're worried about nutrition, by all means, come talk to me. I can definitely help you. Kind of, you can hide vegetables and a lot of things, so you can definitely get the nutrition in other ways. But that said, kids take about 12 times of being. It's between 12 and 14. The research varies a little bit, but it's pretty consistent in that range. That it takes about 12 to 14 exposures before kids are willing to even accept trying something, which I know sounds exhausting and frustrating to any parents listening, but it's just kind of goes to show that, like, it's not going to be the first time they see broccoli they're going to be really excited to try it. They're probably going to be like, it looks really fuzzy, it's green, and all my friends at school tell me that vegetables are gross, so I don't want to eat it. But by the 12th time they see that broccoli, they may be more inclined to eat it. So my recommendation a lot of times is, like, make vegetables that you like, right? So, like, add, even if we're having chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, add a vegetable. You can eat the chicken nuggets and the mac and cheese too, but add a vegetable for yourself. Demonstrate eating those, those healthful eating behaviors, demonstrate those choices, and don't push it. And slowly, I promise, over time, your kids will kind of start to become a little bit more accepting. Now, obviously, there's a lot of nuance in that. There's kids with texture aversions and things like that. So there's it's not going to work, home run every time. But my point is that there's a strategy for every problem. And if that strategy doesn't work, then we can find other ways for you to get vegetables at other meals that maybe aren't the family dinner meal. Things like that. Or another big one is that people's work schedule changes and their physical activity level changes. So for example, if you find yourself working more hours, or maybe you're traveling more for work, and you don't have access to your home, the gym that you normally go to at home, well, we can come up with lots of ways for you to do workouts in a hotel gym. There's lots of ways to move your body at home. It doesn't have to be in a gym setting. Now, obviously, if your goals are like, powerlifting level strength, to a certain extent, you do have to lift heavier weights, but we can usually kind of work that around. Either get you kind of like a nationwide membership somewhere, schedule your workouts for when if you're home on the weekends, that kind of thing. So lots of options, and none of this is meant to, like, set anybody in stone or really even be prescriptive advice. It's just meant to show you that there are lots of ways to kind of modify your goals. Um, I'm sorry, modify your strategies to where you're still getting to your goals, but you're also accommodating the barriers that you now currently have. So I hope that that is helpful for you all. If you have any questions or comments, I always love to hear from you guys. So please leave them below. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. And like I said in the beginning, if any of this sounds like, yes, this girl is speaking my language, these are things that I am dealing with or have dealt with, and I just don't know how to navigate them, but none of the situations I gave as examples apply to you, please, please, please check out the website. Click that communication form on the free resources page, book a free discovery call. We would love to talk to you and hear, all about kind of what's going on with you personally. And then of course, like I said, it's no obligation, no charge, no nothing. We would love to hear if and how we can help you kind of get to your goals and navigate some of these potential tempo changes that you are maybe experiencing in your own life. Our goal is, we're here to be your true partner, and kind of help you reach your goals, get in the thick of it with you, and help you out. So please check all of that out. Otherwise, I will see you all next week.